Recently, Suzhou City witnessed the closure of two significant Japanese-funded factories, Jedic Electronic in Kunshan and Dongfeng Electric Limited Company located on Longtan Road. Established in 2003, Dongfeng Electric was renowned for its specialized operations in the electrical machinery and equipment manufacturing industry and generous employee benefits. However, after 20 years of operation, the company ceased its Suzhou business in September 2023, providing reasonable financial compensation to its employees. Kunshan Jedic Electronic, also favored for its good employee welfare benefits, had to shut down its factory. Additionally, Mitsubishi Motors announced its exit from the Chinese market, becoming the third Japanese car company to withdraw after Dongfeng Renault and Changan Suzuki. As brands like Toyota and Mazda reassess their investments in China, shifting focus to electrics or developing other markets, the trend of Japanese companies withdrawing from the Chinese market and returning to Japan or moving to Southeast Asia is becoming increasingly apparent. In 2020, Japan's investment in ASEAN totaled $15.3 billion, almost double the $8.6 billion invested in China. Since 2012, the attractiveness of the Chinese market to Japanese companies has been declining. With rising labor costs and land prices in China, operating costs for Japanese enterprises have been steadily increasing. Consequently, a series of Japanese companies have adjusted their business layouts in China, with some completely withdrawing. Companies like Panasonic, Toshiba, Nikon, Suzuki, and Ricoh have been adjusting their production lines in China, relocating to Japan or Southeast Asia. The outbreak of COVID-19 in 2020 further exacerbated this trend. Factory shutdowns and logistical disruptions led to a nearly 50% drop in imports from China to Japan, causing production stalls in many Japanese domestic companies due to the lack of essential components. To address this challenge and reduce dependence on the Chinese market, the Japanese government allocated $2.2 billion to assist Japanese enterprises in exiting China. This move prompted nearly 1,800 Japanese companies to relocate their production lines to Japan or Southeast Asia. Many well-known Japanese enterprises like Olympus and Nidec began moving their production lines to other countries. In 2021, Toshiba closed its last factory in Dalian, Canon shut down its Zhuhai factory in 2022 and relocated back to Japan, and Sony completed the transfer of its camera production line in China in 2023. These exits spanned multiple industries, including automotive manufacturing components, chemical fertilizers, pharmaceuticals, and electronics. Amid the geopolitical competition between China and the US, Japanese enterprises have been constructing supply chains independent of China. According to a survey by Nikkei, 50% of major Japanese manufacturing companies plan to reduce their business scale in China, with 90% of them relocating back to Japan and 42 companies considering moving to India and Southeast Asian countries. According to a survey by Nikkei, 50% of major Japanese manufacturing companies plan to reduce their business scale in China. This includes major companies such as Canon, Toyota, KDDI, NEC, Kobe Steel, and Mitsubishi Heavy Industries. The intensifying US-China trade tensions and geopolitical confrontations could lead to Japanese companies in China being placed on US sanction lists, prompting them to leave the Chinese market even without government subsidies. A clothing enterprise based in Osaka Prefecture withdrew from China due to US bans on importing cotton products produced in China. Japanese companies are increasingly concerned about the uncertainties and geopolitical risks of the Chinese market, such as issues related to the Senkaku Islands, Taiwan, and the Fukushima nuclear wastewater discharge into the sea, leading to an increase in the number of companies planning to downsize their operations in China. The latest survey reveals that only 27.7% of Japanese companies plan to expand their business in China, a historically low proportion. The gradual withdrawal of Japanese companies from China reflects their strategic adaptation to a mature market environment and repositioning. For example, Panasonic Storage Battery Company Limited, after operating for 29 years in Shenyang and maximizing factory profits, announced in May 2021 its cessation of production and exit from the Chinese market following a strategic reassessment of market conditions. Previously, Panasonic had achieved global leadership in technology and equipment, earning significant profits. However, due to subsidies from the Chinese government, local solar panel enterprises gained competitive advantages, prompting Panasonic to exit solar cell panel component production and focus on research and development in other directions. Japanese companies adhere to high standards of production quality and are unwilling to sacrifice component quality to reduce costs. They generally comply with labor laws, ensuring workers' rights. In contrast, Chinese market participants often prioritize profits, resorting to exploiting employees and deceiving consumers to capture the market. Japanese companies in China, therefore, struggle to compete with such unscrupulous market tactics. However, Japanese companies have found that their low-end products are priced high in the Chinese market and cannot compete with local enterprises. For high-end products, due to the incompleteness of China's industrial chain, direct import from Japan is more cost-effective. Consequently, it is logical for Japanese companies to relocate production back to Japan. In the high-end market, global consumers, including affluent families in China, still prefer high-end brand products from Japan, the US, or Europe. For instance, Japan's air conditioning compressors lead the industry, especially in central air conditioning systems favored by wealthy households. Additionally, the automotive air conditioning compressor market is also dominated by Japan. Toshiba's case further illustrates the changes in Japanese companies' operations in China. Toshiba's business in China spanned electronics, communication, home appliances, and more, employing about 180,000 workers and once dominating the electronics industry. However, with market and corporate strategy changes, Toshiba began relocating high-end equipment production back to Japan, shifting low-end electrical components to Southeast Asia, where labor costs are lower, and granting global 40-year rights for white goods to Hisense and Midea. Toshiba now focuses on storage chips and energy sectors. At the 4th China International Import Expo, Toshiba showcased products not familiar to consumers, such as lithium batteries and 3D ultrasonic inspection equipment. Toshiba's heavy ion therapy technology, a global pioneer, uses a giant accelerator for accurately targeting tumors. This innovative development stands out among Toshiba's achievements, delivering killing effects on tumors that are 2 to 3 times more potent than those of traditional radiation therapy. As Japanese companies exit China, they become less known to ordinary consumers in the Chinese market, but hold significant positions in the global supply chain. Japan is the only country capable of producing certain special microspheres crucial for LCD screen production. In chip manufacturing, Japan's insulating adhesive technology leads globally, and disruptions in its supply chain have caused worldwide chip shortages. In higher technology fields like fuel cell technology, Japan is at the forefront. In defense technology, Japan demonstrates rapid adaptability, such as quickly deploying long-range missiles and easily transitioning to produce aircraft carriers. As for nuclear weapons, Japan currently does not possess them, but it's widely believed that if it decides to develop them, it could do so in a short time. Japan, with a population less than a tenth of China's, has an economic capacity 2/3 that of China, making it the world's second largest economy. In July this year, China implemented a new counter-espionage law, causing Japanese people to worry about potential imprisonment for visiting China. Addressing this concern, a Japanese individual wrote an article titled "Survival Guide for Japanese in China." The creatively and humorously titled article offered a fresh perspective and expression, captivating readers. The article highlights the implications of China's anti-espionage law, stating that any foreign individual can potentially be suspected as a spy and incarcerated without trial for years, often without any attention or intervention. It mentions that while the Japanese Ministry of Foreign Affairs might intervene to some extent, and the Chinese government might allow Japanese diplomats to visit the prisons, these efforts rarely lead to the release of detainees. The article emphasizes the extreme difficulty of extricating someone from such situations, noting that numerous Americans have faced prolonged detentions, sometimes extending to 20 years. To prevent such dire outcomes, the article outlines essential survival tips for staying safe in China. Furthermore, it urges people who cherish freedom globally to avoid traveling to China unless absolutely necessary, underscoring the significant risks involved. The first essential safety tip is to exercise extreme caution while using mobile phones for photography. Chinese laws have stringent and sometimes unclear regulations on permissible photography locations. For instance, taking pictures of military facilities, strategic resources like rare earth mines, wind power stations by the sea, and certain areas in Beijing is prohibited. Even innocuous intentions can be misinterpreted as espionage or leaking state secrets, leading to detention by authorities. Therefore, it's advised to avoid taking photos in uncertain locations unless absolutely sure it's safe and allowed. The second tip involves mapping. In China, marking or drawing maps should be done with care. Tourists often mark points of interest on maps, but this could be misconstrued as collecting sensitive geographical information, especially in military or strategic areas. Even inadvertent mapping of these areas might be considered illegal and interpreted as collecting or leaking national secrets. The third tip advises against visiting certain politically sensitive regions in China, such as Hong Kong, Tibet, Xinjiang, and Inner Mongolia. In these areas, the activities of foreigners might be closely monitored, and any interaction with locals could be misconstrued as political involvement or interference in internal affairs. It's recommended to maintain a low profile and limit one's role to that of an observer, avoiding sensitive discussions or activities. Departing these areas promptly after necessary visits is advised to minimize risk. Beware during switching of jobs. For Japanese nationals working in Chinese state-owned enterprises, SOEs, switching jobs back to Japanese companies may pose risks, particularly if they had access to important information from the Chinese SOEs. There is a possibility of being suspected of espionage when transferring back to a Japanese firm. Thus, it is advisable to thoroughly evaluate potential risks, especially when considering a career move from a Chinese SOE to a Japanese company. Extreme caution is also recommended when participating in surveys or street interviews in China. Any research activity not approved by the Publicity Department or the Public Security Bureau could be deemed illegal and even suspected as espionage. Random interviews or information gathering on the streets should be avoided to prevent legal issues. Otherwise, the consequences could include lengthy detentions. In addition, the article suggests to avoid attending certain gatherings, particularly those organized by the government or corporations, which might involve sensitive topics or situations and could increase the risk of misinterpretation. One last point in the article suggests that interaction with locals should be limited. Deep, heartfelt conversations or emotionally charged discussions are particularly discouraged. If one wishes to engage in conversations, it is safer to converse with Japanese, Korean, or American individuals. Care should be taken even while speaking in private spaces like cars, as surveillance is widespread, and the general populace in China is known for reporting suspicious activities. Caution is also urged when using Chinese social media platforms like Weibo and WeChat. Posting controversial content can lead to immediate summons for a talk with authorities. Under the policy environment prioritizing national security in China, the phenomenon of foreign capital withdrawal is not limited to Japanese companies. A September 2022 survey of global fund managers by Bank of America revealed a common consensus among international investors to avoid investing in China. According to the Financial Times, from August to October 2022, China attracted significant foreign investment. However, starting mid-October, there was a massive withdrawal of foreign capital from the Chinese market. By the end of October, about 75% of the foreign capital that flowed into China's stock market earlier in the year, amounting to $25 billion, had been withdrawn. This indicates that 2/3 of the conditions for production factors in the entire Chinese economy no longer exist. During China's zero-COVID policy implementation, investors harbored serious doubts about the prospects of the Chinese economy. With the end of the zero-COVID policy, some foreign investors tried to capture the potential rebound of the Chinese economy by investing in A shares and the Hang Seng Index. However, China's economy did not rebound as expected, with both A shares and the Hong Kong stock market performing poorly. When considering investing in the Chinese market, investors are not just focused on short-term profits, but are more concerned with the market's long-term growth potential. However, China's current economic challenges stem not only from internal policies. Even under an authoritarian system, capital can find ways to make money. When a country's economy is struggling, there will always be someone willing to invest, known as bottom fishing. And similarly, capital can flow out when the market is considered too pricey, with investors planning to return later. Since 2018, the trajectory of China-US relations has shifted from cooperation to competition. China's strategy to challenge the US, coupled with its alliance with Russia, prompted the US to impose a series of sanctions on both countries, exerting economic pressure on China. China's production capacity, although crucial in the global supply chain, is not irreplaceable. In recent years, China's overly confident and provocative foreign policy gradually alienated its traditional trade partners, especially Western countries and Japan, leading to downward pressure on the Chinese economy. In the great power competition between China and the US, the capital market is skeptical of the Chinese government's ability to gain an advantage in geopolitical games. Despite attempts to improve relations with the US, China's attitude during meetings with US President Joe Biden was not entirely sincere, increasing investors' uncertainty. capital outflow from China is inevitable. Xi Jinping's strategy to confront the US has failed. The Chinese economy heavily depends on the US and the West. The Chinese Communist Party understands that ties with the US are crucial, as the American market and the dollar are necessary to support China's economic capacity, which other markets cannot sustain. Therefore, Xi Jinping had to personally visit the US for the APEC summit, acknowledging the significance of the dollar. Despite Biden extending diplomatic courtesy, China was still marginalized. The US is committed to rebuilding economic and political relations in the Indo-Pacific region, with a strategy to weaken the CCP. Regardless of how the CCP changes, it has lost the trust of mainstream American society. The US strategy currently focuses on stabilizing the low-end supply chain and economic foundation between the two countries to avoid unnecessary economic shocks due to supply chain disruptions and prevent unnecessary bilateral conflicts. The US will continue to limit China's economic rise until the CCP shows genuine reform.